10 more questions, so, and we only have 30 more minutes, so we just want to be mindful of the time. This is Terry Storch.
Hi, thank you very much. Can I hold that? Okay. I also very much appreciate the work that the Albuquerque Police Department's doing. I've had wonderful experiences with them. But fundamentally, I think APD needs to know that everybody in this room is your employer, and you should be answering to us. And I have some questions for Mr. Harness, because while I love the lofty aspirations of the CPCs and what you, Mr. Martinez, said, that there should be trust and faith in this process, and we're urged to go out and participate in the CPCs. A lot of my information comes from the Albuquerque Journal, and I was very troubled a few weeks ago when I read that former U.S. Magistrate Judge Lorenzo Garcia, who is the city's employee in the policy development, said that input in the policy development is privileged, and there seemed to be, from what I understood, a bar that was placed for your group from even participating in policy development. So why are you encouraging us to come and give you policy ideas when you don't get to participate in the policy development? That's one question. And
can we give him a chance to respond?
Sure,
and then
thank you.
I'll allow you one follow-up question. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, how can I say this? Judge Garcia was wrong. Okay? And the board was, shall I say, very disappointed in his remarks when he came to address the board. It started out as a simple introduction of him to the board and his role with APD in their policy development. And when he spoke to the board, he misspoke about what his role was, and he also misspoke about what the POB's role was, and the CPOA, the CPCs, and the public. He was just flat wrong about that. As I said before, we sit on the Office of Policy Analysis Board, the PPRB, the SOPRC, and we have direct input to the chief for policy and procedures. So when we complete an investigation, there's not only a discipline recommendation that can come from it, but there's also policy recommendations that can come from it. And by the ordinance authored by Councilor Benton, if it's a policy recommendation, we send it over to the chief, and then the chief responds to us in 45 days. So yes, that's what he said, but he was wrong.
Okay. And a follow-up question is, does your organization, your group, has it taken a position on the APD's statement that it will not release lapel videos until an investigation is complete, which can take upwards of a year or more?
We have not taken a position on that. I know when that story came out, we did review the body-worn camera, the body-worn recording device policy, and we did not find that the releasing of those was covered. So those decisions would be made by the chief and in accordance with the IPRA laws. The board has not taken that up, but you could go to the Office of Policy Analysis website, and you can submit directly to that body a policy recommendation on the release of lapel videos. And that body will respond to you in writing whether or not that policy recommendation is incorporated. So you can directly go there and make that policy recommendation.
Question from Mr. Bill Cass.
You're gonna hold this, huh? You won't let me get a hold of it. As you may know, I've been here several times before, and my interest primarily has been on policy. But I'd like to relate, this is a little bit of a preamble, but I'd like to make the connection between policy and practice. And I've been going to a lot of CPC meetings, and at one of the recent meetings I learned something, which I'll get to in a minute. But in the meantime, there's information, if you go to the website at APD, that says these are the core values of APD. The 4 core values. Integrity. We maintain the trust of the community by being honest, compassionate, and consistent in our actions. We hold ourselves responsible to the highest standard of personal and professional ethical conduct. Respect. We respect the sanctity of life, the dignity of all people, and use only that force necessary to accomplish our lawful duty. Fairness. We treat everyone as we want to be treated by being objective, courteous, and equitable. Pride. We take pride in our department and its historical heritage. We are dedicated to professionalism, service, and moral courage. If APD were practicing these, there's no reason for any of us to be here in the room. And this is not a meeting about the good things that APD does, but it's making them live up to the things that they promise here in these values. Well, I contend that community policing is about developing trust. And it's not APD trusting the community, it's about the community trusting APD. The community is, we're who we are. It's APD that we want to change. DOJ isn't here because of the good things that APD does. It's here because of the bad things they found that APD did. And so those are the things I think we ought to be talking about. So anyway, what I would like to do is mention a few of the things that are a source of mistrust in the community. For example, reverse sting operations. Fundamentally, sting operations are a dishonest policy. It's misleading by the police officer that he's pretending to be somebody he's not. That's dishonest in order to entrap, in many cases, citizens. There's a legal definition of that, I'm sure, and I suspect they don't cross that line. Property seizures are something that are basically dishonest, and it's something that the feds allow when the state decided not to. One of the things that I find really disconcerting is that it's illegal for me to lie to the FBI. It's not illegal for the FBI to lie to me. That's a dishonest policy. I'm on a roll here. So what I'd like to know is, how are we going to get APD to live up to the honesty value, just that one alone, in order to develop community trust, and when their practices clearly aren't that. One last example, at the most recent CPC meeting that I went to in the Heights, it was actually one of the best ones so far. The officers there were talking about approaching a vehicle that was where the driver was being stopped for something. And they talked about maintaining a position of advantage. And they said, and so there were questions from the audience about what that meant. And they said, well, we can't tell you everything about that because we don't want, to be put at a disadvantage. That's dishonest. That's not telling the community, that's not showing trust in the community, that's showing mistrust in the community. Those are the kinds of things that we need to change, not we, APD needs to change in order to live up to this settlement agreement.
Let's give Dr. Ginger a chance to respond.
Well, first of all, let me make just a quick personal comment if I can. Thank you very much for being here. I've been doing this since 1969, and you're only the second self-admitted policy wonk I've ever met. But thank you for being here. And that is a series of excellent questions. And it's almost Yoda-esque. If you really understand policy, it's almost Yoda-esque in its execution. It is really so simple to conceptualize. Be honest. Treat others like you'd like to be treated. And so difficult to implement administratively. And therein lies the rub of policy. It's not just words on paper. And that's where most of our police agencies fail. They think policy is just words on paper. Policies is the way you act day in, day out, from the time you get the keys from your sergeant at the beginning of your shift to the time you throw the keys to the sergeant at the end of your shift. And that's policy, the behavior you exhibit from point A to point B every night when you're on the job. And that's where DOJ wants to get APD. It's where APD wants to get APD. It's where I want to get APD. It's where you want to get APD. What we need to do is figure out how to do it. Therein, as they say, lies the rub. Some folks think you do it one way. Some folks think you do it another way. The truth is APD has to do it its way. But they have to understand what the task is. It's not 278 boxes on a settlement agreement. It's changing the way APD thinks about police work, executes police work, and plans the police work of the future. And that's when a police agency starts to think that way, they're home. It's not easy to get there. Trust me, I've tried in a lot of different agencies. It's not easy, but it can be done. As the old adage goes, gentle pressure, relentlessly applied, which ought to be our monitoring motto, because that's the way we try to do business. We don't come in here like gangbusters and put the chief and his crew up against the wall and say, all right, listen, it's our way or the highway. We're the antithesis of that. And we get a lot of heat for it. A lot of people think the first 6, 8 months that we're on a job that we're too easy going, too easy to get along with, we're not cracking down hard enough. That's not the way to do it.
Beth Lehman? Beth Lehman? Is Beth here? Okay, Vicki Madden.
Personal situation. Okay, you said you bring a group of 10 people in to investigate. Where do they come from? I'm not one who read your report, so I'm in the dark here.
Well, you probably wouldn't know if you'd read the reports.
Okay.
That report is not identified by who wrote it by section or anything like that.
Okay, I just wondered where you gathered the people.
I'll tell you about who they are and roughly where they came from.
Okay.
One fellow on the team is a former commander at the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. He's on the team because his job at Pittsburgh was to implement this consent decree. The settlement, then it was called the settlement agreement, not the CASA. And I wanted APD to be able to talk with him about how they did it. Now, he has a monitoring job to do, but he's also here to be sort of a guide, if they want it, about how that was done. Another fellow is the former director of the Office of State Police Affairs from New Jersey. And his job was to do my job when I wasn't there as monitor. And I brought him here because he has probably, in my mind, the second best understanding in the United States about how consent decrees and settlement agreements ought to work. And he knows internal affairs better than I do, which is saying something. Really a sharp fellow. Another fellow was a captain with the New Jersey State Police, and he ran their internal affairs unit, and he was the guy that turned that internal affairs unit around when I was there as monitor. I wanted APD to have that experience. I wanted them to be able to pick his brain. We have a PhD from Chicago who's here talking about CIT and CNT and all the acronym of crisis response. For someone so young, she's been with that field since day one. I mean, she was almost witnessed its birth, and her entire career has been centered around that. She's here to share that experience with APD. We have the former commandant of the New Jersey State Police when they were under the consent decree, and he's the commandant that turned that academy around and got them from 30% in compliance to 100% in compliance in 18 months. Stellar job. I wanted APD to have the benefit of that experience. I'm forgetting somebody. Oh, Pete, yeah. I have a fellow here with more knowledge about police operations and the concept and the theory of policing than I do, and I used to teach policing at the graduate level. And I wanted APD to be able to just pick his brain, and they do. And sometimes they get into disagreements, and it's fun to see the room afterwards. But they're hashing out ideas and concepts and policies to make this a better place. That's why this team is here. Basically, all I do is orchestrate it and spend a lot of time writing the reports, and I wrote the methodology, and we're doing here what we've done in other places. Who else did I miss? Steve Rickman. I was trying not to give names, but he was, when the COPS office was born at the Department of Justice, he was there. When state-of-the-art community policing systems were developed in America, he was there. Wasn't there in a seat. He was up here trying to get things done and make things work. And I wanted him to bring that experience to APD. I wanted them to be able to pick his brain. I have a colleague of mine from the university in San Antonio where I taught, who specializes in community outreach and mediation. I wanted them to be able to pick his brain. So my team literally are the best people I know for this job, and that's
Okay.
why they're here.
So you have the same team that goes from city to city, and you get a different
No,
group for
no,
our particular one for Albuquerque?
Absolutely not. We do one job, this job.
Okay.
I had a very lucrative career as a consultant. Before I took this job, I suspended it. I do this job alone. Now, the other folks might take something from time to time, but their major focus is here. It's Albuquerque. So this is not one of those shops that's running 5 consent decrees at one time. We do one job, and we do it as well as we can. Did I get, was that the question you had? Okay.
We have Todd
No,
Kirstein.
that was the,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Chief Eden.
we thought we maybe had missed a team member, but I think we didn't, so.
We have Todd Kirsting. Okay, I'll come around, sir.
We'll come to you.
I'll come.
You're okay, we'll come to you.
Sorry. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Todd Kirsting, Southeast Community Police Council. And I'm curious I've been trying to read up how to adapt to all the generations that's growing up. One question is, when you wrote all this, is what's the average age that put these policies together?
You're talking about the APD policies?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure, but I'm sure there are no millennia
Yeah.
involved in that process. And I might be wrong. I'm not sure who PD put up, but I know all of my guys have less hair than I do, so, we're pushing it.
Well, I think that's going to be something I'm watching and learning as I'm working with the CPCs, is the millennials are great leaders. They're our future. They learn much differently. They can find solutions much quicker, but they also want a broader parameters.
Right.
So when you mentioned 95%, I'm going to be thinking about that for the next maybe few months or years, to where maybe 90%, I don't know what that would happen or create.
It's not going to happen with us because we've given it to the judge, and unless he changes his mind, we're at 95%. So, I mean, I don't mean to be harsh, but it's non-negotiable. It's agreed to by the judge.
Yes.
But now, not that I would do it, but the next project down the line, I think that might be something we need to talk about is qualitative measures, not just quantitative. I think that's a good point, and I'll be right there with you on that.
Okay, and the thing on the CPCs too is to keep in mind, I'm noticing in your reports, I haven't read all the reports on the CPCs, but we're only supposed to be, technically we can meet twice a year, but they're very passionate about meeting more. And they're up to they can be up to 72 times a year compared to 12. Is that being recognized to where, when the reports are written, that we actually are getting involved? We're just having more meetings. If we had 2 a year, that's much less to where other people might join in and, you know, show up to an Isotopes game or whatnot, and we can go off to the side, or, you know, large events like Summerfest. But I just want to make sure that during the monitoring, the reporting, that that's being considered too. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, it's really a great question, and maybe after the meeting or sometime we can get together and talk, because I like the way you think about process versus function and that sort of thing. Right now, I mean, I'm a process guy. You can probably tell by talking to me, I'm a process guy. You know, I'm interested in how you got there, not just what you got when you got there. And I get criticized about that for a lot in the industry. Most monitors are not process guys; they're outcome guys. They just want to know if you've done it or not. They don't care how you did it. I'm kind of the other way. I'd like to know how you did it, because that gives me a good idea about how long it's going to last when I leave. But right now, what we have is a monitoring methodology that's about 350 pages long that spells out in detail exactly how we're going to evaluate every one of the 278 pieces of work that need to be done here. That's online. You can get it from the U.S. Attorney's Office. You can get it, I think, from APD's website. If I ever get my website up, you can get it up. You can get it from there. But the hardest thing I've ever done in my life is get, sir. Right. You can exceed it as far as you want. Yeah, good point, Chief, thanks. If you guys want to have 70 meetings a year, knock it out. That's fine. It's just that there need to be a minimum number of machines, right? So I'd have to go back and look at it again. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what that methodology says about that piece, but I'm sure it says at least 2.
It's a minimum.
Yeah.
Dr. Ginger, we still have a few more questions, so I'm going to try to move this along. We have Robbie. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Robbie Wed.
Over here. I want to thank you all for being here and the work you're doing. The reason you're all here, and we're all here, is because the community for many, many years pressed for change. And that's what this is all about. I'm a concerned member of the community, and I want to bring up 3 points. You mentioned the changes in policies and training. There's another aspect to this which I think is very, very important. It's to bring to justice the officers that have been found to commit crimes in our community. And I wonder if the consent decree, CASA, has anything to address that.
In a way, and let me be clear about what I'm trying to say. I don't want anybody to get confused. The CASA is a forward-looking document. My purview is to not go back to 2001 or 2002 or 2003 and relitigate issues and cases, and that's admittedly one of the weaknesses of this process. So we are fairly tightly limited as a monitoring team in terms of the kinds of things that we can look at. There are 278 pieces, and we, unlike most monitors, we look at every one of those 278 pieces every time. A lot of monitors will come in and one visit they'll look at 86 things, and the next visit they'll look at 100 different things. But here we look at everything every time, and that's why those reports are so deep.
We appreciate what the police department does for us, but in order to help the good people, the good officers in our police department, the bad ones will not stop what they're doing unless they're punished. and that's really important. Two other very quick points. The overuse of the SWAT team in Albuquerque, it's continuing. Last week, the week before, it's just on and on and on. And that is escalation. When somebody's sleeping with headphones on, and you send a SWAT team in and destroy their apartment, gas them, gas the neighborhood, that is escalation. That's a problem that is ongoing in the APD, and it'll help our officers if the people responsible for bringing in those SWAT teams change their policies. The SWAT teams are not the ones to blame. And very quickly, the last thing, Sean Willoughby is a problem. That is going to come in the way of our officers in APD getting the representation they need and the help they need, because he is not helping them, he's hurting them with his policies.
Thank you.
Our next question is Ilsa Beal.
Hi, I would like to follow up a little bit on what Todd had said, and I was pleased that he had already started paving the way to talk about the CPCs and how they are then also looked at in the report. But I would also like to caution you to not then try and place too much emphasis or expectations, demands, I think it would be the right word, on the CPCs. I'm most probably my usual critical, cynical self, and I get the impression that the CPCs were started thinking that the city and APD and everyone would be able to get away with some window dressing. And as Todd has now indicated, because the question wasn't what is the minimum number of times the people need, the CPCs need to meet, Todd was actually making the point that because people are taking accountability to the community member in the front and actually going to the meetings, there are now monthly meetings and they're actually doing a lot more. So this animal was created and then sort of climbed out of the cage and grew, and actually now is in the process. It's got the potential of actually being something. But now it's still within the strictures of how it was originally intended to just be a cheerleading mechanism. It doesn't have proper autonomy from APD. And then also, I've heard you saying this before, and I can see that there's no other way of doing this. This whole process has to be forward-looking. I appreciate that. The thing is, however, that you cannot sever people from their past experiences and how they've come to see things, their perspectives. And people have been burned so badly through the focus groups and this forum and that forum, and then we realize we give our time and nothing happens. So please get your website up. You promised that the first meeting, when Ken Sanchez had hosted it, please get it up, because you can easily have a tab there where people can actually start giving you comments, because many people can't get to the CPCs, don't want to go to the CPCs because they still don't trust them. But you need that community input, and come on, hire someone. You've got 4 million or whatever you got from the city. Hire someone and get the website up.
I've hired someone. I'm not doing it myself. If I were doing it myself, it would be ready in 2027. But before we get off this last point, one of the reasons that a specific individual is on my team, the fellow that I mentioned that taught with me at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, is his specialty is conflict resolution and reconciliation. And so one of the things I'm asking him to do is to look at the city of Albuquerque and the Albuquerque Police Department and see if there's something we can leave behind when we go that is designed to resolve conflict instead of talk about it, that is designed to mediate and reconcile instead of confront. And I brought him in specifically to do that. It's not required by the settlement agreement. It's just something I want to leave when I go. So that we're working diligently on trying to get that done. And trust me, I'm about as frustrated as you are with this website business. Yes, sir.
Peter Simonson, and I just want to say that notwithstanding this gentleman's comments about SWAT, which concern me, your report talks in quite glowing terms about changes that have been made to the SWAT operations, and from everything I can tell, there's quite a bit of substance to that, and I want to congratulate the chief and the department on those changes. That is central to the reform of police militarization, the use of the overuse of force, et cetera. As Mr. Dinelli read, though, your report in many places makes scathing comments about the systemic failure to monitor use of force and the low culture of accountability. And I don't know how many people here actually attended the hearing, but that was not the impression I derived from that hearing. I thought that your comments were very muted at the hearing and did not really get to the core of those issues, which are rife throughout the report. And I was especially surprised that the judge ended the hearing with a congratulatory party for APD and its accomplishments around the reform process. It was called a topping off party for APD's reform, suggestive of the fact that APD is nearing completion of the reform. I left that hearing very discouraged in this process. And I wonder if you can share with us, how do we reconcile what is in your report with what in fact was displayed at the hearing today? You yourself, the comments that you made, and the way that the judge characterized the state that we're in right now with the reform process.
Well, I'll deal with my comments first, and I'll stand by both my report and I'll stand by my process that I use to get change made. It would be fairly easy for me to walk up to the chief and gouge my thumb in his eyes and tell him he was a no-good SOB and blah, 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 blah. I could do that, but he and I are probably not going to work together much after that. I need to build a relationship with this man so that he knows he can trust me to do what I say I'm going to do. And that report is his roadmap for what he needs to do with the agency. I don't need to call him names in public to get him to do that. The judge will get him to do it if he doesn't want to. And you know, I don't think that's the case. I don't think the judge is going to have to make him do it. So, Peter, pardon me if I need to be blunt with this, but there's a big, big difference between writing a report that, I mean, eventually it gets consumed by the public, yes. But that report is written as a roadmap for this police department. And it's written as an informative mechanism for the judge. It's not written for the public. So, first of all, that document is a roadmap, and that's why it's as clear and concise and sometimes as brutal as it needs to be. That doesn't mean that when I see the chief, I have to call him names. I'm just not going to do that. That's not who I am. So I'd be happy to talk with you about it more. I mean, we've had several meetings about this. I think I mentioned to you from day one, the first report would be relatively easy. The second report would be tougher. The third report would be tougher. The fourth report would be tougher until what? I can't deal with the media. Literally cannot deal with the media. It's in my contract. I don't care about the media. I care about the job these folks do, period. And I'm here to put down in black and white what the problems are and make recommendations to fix it. It's very difficult to call a guy names and then try to have a meeting with him to resolve some issues. Now, you know that. You've been in this business a long time.
Just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that you should call the chief names by any stretch of your imagination. I just wanted to see what was proposed before reflected in the conversation we're hearing today.
Well, I don't think you'll ever see it. I'm sorry. If that's what it means for me to do a good job in your mind, that does that. It's not. And it's worked pretty well in other places, but eventually it's going to work here, because the one thing I know, and one of the reasons I'm not as mean and ugly and nasty as everybody wants me to be, is I got a judge behind me. And if these guys want out of this thing, what's in that report is what's important. And I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. I have to apologize. We have 2 more questions. We want to get them in. I have Mr. Ernest Servant, who's promised a very brief question.
Just one quick thing before we move on for Pete and Peter. Been confused here. If we need to carry this conversation further, I'm willing to do it. I understand what your concerns are. I've made change in New Jersey State Police without being an SOB. And I made change in Pittsburgh without being an SOB. I will make change here without being an SOB. And if I have to be an SOB to do this job, I won't do it anymore, because that's not who I am. And if that's what anybody needs from me to assume I'm doing a good job, then we're just at odds and it won't work. But we can continue this conversation later.
This is Ernest Sturtevant.
Just in reference to the 2 ahead of me briefly, I look forward to the improvements on paper with the SWAT team, that they come to the street. They have not manifested themselves on the streets of our city yet. With regards to the CPCs and the trumpeting of the public now using the CPCs as an avenue of communication into this system, I will say in the last 6 weeks I've been to several CPC meetings, and they vary from very good to absolutely abhorrent. Where is in the system that we're supposed to use now the accountability for the CPCs that are non-functioning? And let me say, they're non-functioning when a resident has to stand up and ask the chairman who runs the meeting, because Selena Espinoza and any of the cops that are at the meetings are running the meetings, not the public.
Read the reports.
No, I'm asking, where do we go for accountability?
Who is accountable for that?
Read the reports. It's my job. It'll be done before I leave here. Or they'll bring somebody else in to do it. I answered the question as best I can. I want to get into a debate. It's my job. How much more clearly do you want the responsibility affixed?
Thank you very much. We have the last question. It's Sarah Kelly.
So I just wanted to sort of extraneously mention, while we're actually discussing the wrongdoings of APD, which are much more to be discussed, I just wanted to say that I think that priority in policy is a huge cause of this issue, and it's, again, very extraneous, but I think like priority merge and all of that's just one small thing for city buses. That's all the things that aren't addressed by APD, whereas profiling as a means of crime prevention is a major cause behind the wrongdoings. And so I think that policy prioritization could really be addressed, which I need to go speak with civilian oversight, but just wanted to mention that briefly.
Thank you,
Well,
Ms.
and just so everybody knows, these policies aren't done. There's a 6-month review and an annual review after that. So if you're unhappy with the policy now, work on it for the next review period. And get yourselves organized and get reasonable comments into the city. And if the monitoring team is still here, into the monitoring team. And we'll work through that process. If that helps answer the question, I'm not sure if it does or not.
Sorry for interrupting. Dr. Ginger, that concludes the question and answer. So if you have any closing statement to make before we turn it over to Councilor Benton.
Well, I'd just like to thank all of you for being here. I know I've seen a lot of familiar faces in the room, and I know you spend a lot of time and personal time and energy and effort in this reform process, and I want to thank you for that. we're doing the very best job we know how, and I firmly believe I've got the best team in America doing this job right now. So as the old saying goes, if we can't fix it, it's probably not going to get fixed. And that is about as clearly as I can state it. I mean, you talk to other folks in Pittsburgh, talk to folks in New Jersey, they will tell you that the monitoring process there was relentless, just as it is here. I'm sure the chief will admit we don't cut him much slack. But, and that's our job. It's not my job to cut him slack. My job is to, if I can, nudge him in the right direction. But I have to remember, it's his shop. You know, it's his cop shop. It's not mine. And you're the ones who elect the people that appointed the chief. All right? So that avenue is there, is it not? He's the one responsible for managing it, is it not? So that's the mechanism. Vitriol and anger and all of that stuff, I understand it, but it doesn't fix anything. Never has. So I'll turn it, now that I've riled him up, I'll turn it over to you, Counselor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ginger. And to just follow through with that last discussion as to who's responsible, yes, the city leadership is responsible. And just to remind everybody, I'm your representative of District 2 on the legislative body of the city government. There's an executive branch of city government. The executive branch in the past has, without consent, has appointed the chief, and Chief Eden is Mayor Berry's appointment. The council has taken these concerns very seriously and struggled ourselves with a lot of the questions that have been asked tonight, and to the point of putting on the ballot, which was approved by the voters, that we will have advice and consent for the next mayor's appointment of chief. I think that's a very important advancement. And I was the sponsor of moving that forward because I want to take that responsibility. But I've got to have the power to take more responsibility towards who becomes the chief. And I just want to tell you that I am, as a District 2 representative and dealing with constituent issues, which is another part of our job, I am very dependent on APD. And so criticisms were made that we're not doing adequate oversight, or the issue with regard to the retention pay. I did not support that for the upper command. I supported that only up to the level of commander. I am very dependent on our area commanders. We have 2 excellent area commanders in District 2 that really work hard and that are younger and that are innovators, I think, and problem solvers. And if we were to vacate the upper command, those guys would probably rise to the command, and everybody would probably like that, but I'd be out of a very good area commander. So, right now we have a crisis, I'm just going to say it, in numbers at APD. And I'll say one thing, I really want to commend Chief Eden. He has put more officers out on the beat. He's taken, recently, a lot of these specialized units have been disbanded and just put out onto regular patrol. That's kind of a triage decision that he made, and his decisions on who he appoints for his command staff and so forth are his. But we will have, at the end of this year, a new district attorney. I'm looking forward to that. We will have, at the end of next year, a new mayor, and I'm looking forward to that too. And I think when those candidates are out there talking about what they intend to do as mayor, we need to ask them a lot of these same questions that you're asking me and the people up front here tonight. Just want to make that really clear, but I am very appreciative and dependent on our command staff, of our area commands. That's how it breaks down. You're probably familiar with that. But the council took a lot of effort in revising the civilian police oversight process and in selection of Mr. Harness, who I think is doing a fantastic job. That's all just getting off the ground right now. It's just getting off the ground. I'm not going to throw that up in the air and disrupt it right now. I'd be very interested as a policymaker in talking and discussing with Pete and others in the future about how is that relationship between internal affairs and the CPC? That's an important question that needs to be discussed. But I'm going to admit it, I'm being somewhat cautious about just jumping in to various aspects of this process right now while it's just getting off the ground. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm totally open to discussion with any of you who want to talk about this, to call at the office, send me emails. I do read my emails. We've got to close up the library in deference to our wonderful hosts, the library staff. We want them to be able to go home, but thanks everybody for coming out.
And do feel free to take cookies as you